And Heike kind of beat me to it. We are going to be recording today's meeting, the presentation. At least the Q&A portion doesn't get recorded. So we want to encourage conversation during today's high impact action roundtable. This roundtable is part of our technical assistance that we provide from UBRI in support of the NYSERDA Clean Energy Communities Program, as you guys all saw in that video. So we are here today to talk about community choice aggregation. It is one of the high impact actions of the New Clean Energy Communities program. During the conversation, during the presentation rather, if there are questions, feel free to use the chat function. We will have ample time for Q&A after the presentations, but if you have questions as they come up, feel free to use the chat function. And then, after the discussion, if there's others who have other non-CCA kind of clean energy communities questions about the program, feel free to let us know, and we'll stick around after the CCA discussion to answer any questions that you might have beyond community choice aggregation. So this is the menu item of the Clean Energy Communities program. All of these are the high impact actions associated with the program. Community choice aggregation is one of what we call the long-term or the longer-term actions, more community facing. It takes a pretty significant amount of community engagement and public participation to see this through to the end. With that too, it's also one of the larger points getters for the new program, new high point actions. With the new version of the program, there's new rounds of funding. So based on your community size, if you're a small community with a population of less than 40,000 people, you'd be in the small to medium community. Those with a population over 40,000 we're all eligible for grants. Those large communities are in a statewide competition with other large communities. So Buffalo, Amherst, Tonawanda, Cheektowaga are all in competition with places like Rochester and Syracuse and places statewide, whereas those smaller communities are really within the region. So Heike and I, with the University of Buffalo's Regional Institute, we are responsible for Erie and Niagara counties. And so we provide hands-on technical assistance for those two counties in the program. A little bit about the action and how it kind of ties into the program. Essentially, it's a points-based program, and each high impact action has points associated with it. As I mentioned earlier, community choice aggregation, it's worth up to 2,000 points in the program. So if you think about those grants, 2,000 points gets you, 2/3 of the way there towards the lowest level grant of 3,000 points. And there's kind of two different pathways. One is getting an opt-out community distributed generation for the entire municipality. Essentially, community choice aggregation allows entire municipalities to choose their own energy provider and select a renewable source if they want to. I don't want to steal too much of our presenters' thunder here today, so I'm going to kind of keep it high level like that. Our role in the process at UBRI is to help connect you to the third-party administrator that really kind of helps, and I would say is integral to this process. We provide template legislations and MOUs and other supporting documents and can help kind of organize things once municipalities kind of take that first step in passing the legislation to enable that. So we're here to support you from the NYSERDA programmatic side. And today we're joined by actually somebody who's been down the path of enacting CCA legislation and seeing it through, bringing it to fruition. Rob Richardson, he's one of our colleagues in the Clean Energy Communities program. He's the coordinator from the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. So over in the Rochester area. And so previous to that, in his role as assistant city manager for the city of Canandaigua, he helped walk them through the entire process of community choice aggregation. So we're happy to welcome Rob here today. Rob, if you have any other things to add about the program, feel free. As you know, Rob is basically fills the role that Heike and I fill here in Erie County.
I would say that it is probably my favorite item in the Clean Energy Communities program because of the collective impact that it has. It's a community or an aggregation of communities all coming together and saying, we want our supply to run on renewable energy. And even 1 or 2 homes in a neighborhood makes an impact. When you have entire municipalities or entire regions, the reduction in greenhouse gases can be absolutely incredible. So, as Jason mentioned, I am the Clean Energy Communities Coordinator in the Genesee Finger Lakes region. And I have a very unique perspective on community choice aggregation because not too long ago, I guided my municipality through the entire thing from start to finish. And my inclusion in this kind of came about from another roundtable discussion that a bunch of coordinators were having, and a lot of things were coming up as potential concerns or things that people had heard. So today, my hope is that by explaining my experience and kind of walking you through the city's thought process and how we made the decisions that we made, I can dispel some of the rumors and address some of those concerns. And as Jason said, if you end up having any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Next slide, please. So a little bit about me and my background. I have a bachelor's in politics and government from the University of Hartford. I did about 9 years of youth development work for the YMCA Greater Rochester after I graduated. But then I really wanted to get back into service and into public service. And my incredible wife allowed me to quit my job and go back to school full time. So I did a master's in public management and public policy at the College of Brockport in about 15 months. After that process, I was hired immediately to be the assistant city manager of the city of Canandaigua, New York, and the city's environmental initiatives fell onto my desk. I'd never really done any work in the environmental sector. I was conscious about global warming and some of the climate concerns, but I never really worked with it directly. And it very quickly became my favorite part of the job. It gave me the opportunity to interact with the community and business owners to really make an impact in the city that we lived in. And during my tenure there, I was there for 3.5 years. I guided the city to both a Clean Energy Communities designation as well as a CSC bronze certification, which is something I'm extremely proud of because it's a very difficult program to navigate. But when the previous coordinator went on to a different opportunity, the chance to help other municipalities achieve the same level of success that we helped the city find during my tenure, it was really appealing to me. So that's how I ended up at Genesee Finger Lakes and how I ended up in front of you today. In the little bit of spare time that I do have, I'm a soccer coach. It's been a huge part of my life for over 3 decades now. I've been the boys varsity assistant at Harley-Allendale Columbia, which is a school here in our region, for 16 years. And I am the head coach for the Canandaigua Attack Boys U18 Elite team. So I have a lot of fun with that. It helps keep me young, but it also keeps me connected to younger generations and hearing about what their concerns are about the future that they want and the world they want to grow up in. So it gives me a little bit more of a unique perspective that I bring to work with me every day. Next slide, please. So give you a really high level answer for what community choice aggregation is. It's also a pretty simple answer. That's exactly how he explained it. In 2016, the Public Service Commission gave the power and authority for municipalities or group of municipalities to aggregate their demand for their residents and negotiate bulk purchasing prices. Whenever you move into a new residence, whether you purchase a home or rent an apartment, you have the option to select an energy supplier. A lot of people don't know that. So we just want the lights to turn on and we go with whatever the default is. And the default is the normal mixture for energy that's used in your community. There's a graphic I have here that shows what the traditional energy mix for the city of Rochester is, which is our largest municipality in the Genesee Finger Lakes region. And as you can see, they get their sources from a variety of places. But one of them is from fossil fuels, and that includes coal, that includes gas, that includes things that have been shown to leave an impact on the environment after they've been utilized. So the real goal of community choice aggregation is not just to pool purchasing power, but is to give entire groups of cities and towns and villages the ability to negotiate lower prices for the energy that their community uses from completely renewable sources. Next slide, please. And the goal of community choice aggregation is really to eliminate the use of fossil fuels. You might not be surprised to find out that the fossil fuel component of the energy supply is the cheapest to produce. So you want that in there from the energy company perspective because it's going to help your bottom line. When you have entire communities saying, no, we don't want that, we want renewable energy, and we're going to pool 10, 15, 20, 30,000 people together to give it the appeal to make it worth you making a deal with us, it changes things a little bit. So, you know, that's why it's such a powerful tool for communities who are really wanting to eliminate their carbon footprint, because as we all know, building energy use is one of the biggest polluters that we have. Next slide, please. So a little bit of backstory about how I got associated with CCA. Very shortly after I started my position with the city, I was given the Clean Energy Communities program as one of my projects, and that was to get the city over the line to receive a Clean Energy Communities designation. So after we received that designation, we started looking at other items in the program, and at the time, the older version of community choice aggregation with the brown mix included as a potential option was still very much part of the CEC program. When we looked at it though, the city initially was not interested in taking this up, and there was a few reasons for that. The primary one being that the administrative burden on staff was going to be pretty heavy. In particular, the departments that this would have impacted were already running short-staffed, which is something I'm sure most municipalities are familiar with. And to give them the responsibility of operating a new program, which has the potential to generate a lot of public interest and a lot of public feedback, it's a big ask. And if your community doesn't have the capacity to do that, which we didn't at the time, it makes the program difficult to pursue. Another reason why is that there was no guarantee for 100% renewable supply. A little bit about the city of Canandaigua, New York. It sits on a beautiful lake in the Finger Lakes. And not only is it a huge economic development and tourism driver, it also provides drinking water to 70,000 people in our region. So the city as a whole is very environmentally conscious and had been doing a lot of the work towards sustainability and reducing its carbon footprint before the CEC program was even implemented. Another reason why we didn't initially pursue it was we couldn't guarantee our residents would save money. Everybody would love to do environmental projects, but if it's going to create a situation where your residents and taxpayers are going to see potentially astronomical increases on their energy costs, it unfortunately doesn't matter how green the process is, it's not going to be something that's well received. So the potential for the commodity to fluctuate and drop below or go above whatever our agreed price was very real, and we just didn't feel comfortable pursuing it. And you know, another thing that needs to be said is that in general, it seemed like a very overwhelming task. There's 11,000 people just about in our community, and you know, do we have the right to make this decision for them? Do we even have the right to suggest this? How are we going to reach everybody? How are we going to convince the people on city council and the homeowners and the residents that this is something that we really should do? And to be honest, we psyched ourselves out a little bit. A lot of our concerns, a lot of our initial reactions about large negative feedback were really kind of grounded in just that, and that was a fear that the community wasn't going to accept it. What's great about this program is that you can go all the way through the end of it. You can select a third-party administrator, you can go out to bid, you can get your prices back, you can get all the way up to the point where you're looking at contracts and trying to decide whether or not you want to sign one, and still turn around and opt out and decide not to do it. So yes, that's a long process to go through if you decide not to implement CCA, but there's nothing that is actually binding you to the process once you start it until you actually make an agreement with the supplier. So within our own office of city administration, we bounced it off each other a couple of times, and it just wasn't going to work for our city at the time. And then something was added to the program, which made it a much more viable option for us. Next slide, please. The component of third-party administration coming into the program was beyond scope changing. The third-party administrator plays a huge role in this process. First and foremost, they are the one that will go to market to help you get the aggregation price that you're looking for. So they'll work directly with the suppliers. They will talk to you about what your community's energy goals are, what kind of deals you might be interested in pursuing and structuring, and handle the PSC and the business end of things for you. It also removes all the administrative burden from your staff and your municipality altogether. They handle all the incoming phone calls, and there's a number that is created for your community that they can call directly and speak to the people that are your third-party administrator. They handle all the opt-in and opt-out process, which leads into another huge role that they have, is they're the driver of the community engagement and education. They will come out to your community and hold events. They will speak at meetings. They will attend community events. They are really there to make sure that your community is going to be ready for this. Your community has the information that they need, and they work with the city or the municipality directly to make sure that the messaging is tailored to what's right for you, and making sure that this is the right thing for your community. They're super active in terms of participation. The third-party administrator that we had was fantastic. They followed up with us regularly. They updated us on things that might be changing, things that we might be unaware of. It was an active conversation. It wasn't, okay, here you go, we've selected you, now go do your work. It was, thank you for selecting us. We want to make sure that we're involved in your community and that we can have the impact that you would like to have by implementing this in the first place. And they also continue to support the municipality after adoption and after implementation. So even now, over 5 months into the city of Canandaigua, we're running on community choice aggregation. They still handle all of our calls from residents who have concerns. They still help with the opt-in and opt-out process. Do you have people that will still contact the municipality directly? Absolutely. The majority of those calls that I took, though, were from people who just wanted to make sure that they were not being scammed, and that this was something that the city was really actively participating and pushing in. It comes at no cost to the municipality, which I think is another huge thing that needs to be said. They make their money through the electricity charges, and it's folded into the supplier contract. So there's absolutely no financial cost to the municipality once they've chosen a third-party administrator for any of the support that they get. And the importance of that third-party administrator cannot be overstated, because, as I've said before, without having that third-party administrator supporting the city of Canandaigua, we would not have implemented community choice aggregation. It's really that simple, because without that extra set of hands that Jason talked about and those community partners who are helping you do this work, it becomes overwhelming for a community with limited resources. Next slide, please. So a timeline of the process that we followed with the city of Canandaigua. After hearing that there was the possibility for third-party administration, we started discussing this again. It had been about a year since we'd explored it, and we actually were contacted by an organization that ended up being our third-party administrator to say, hey, we are aware that this is something that you've explored in the past. Do you know that this is something that is available to you now? So once we knew that we could work with a third-party administrator and we could alleviate the concerns of our staff and some of our elected officials on what it would do for staff, we could start having some really honest discussions about whether or not this was something we wanted to pursue. There was a little bit of a delay in our process because when the city engaged, there was a large aggregation of suburban communities around the city of Rochester that was, ramping up to pursue this. And we were going to hop on what they were doing, because if the CCA contract is written with the piggybacking provision, you can allow other municipalities to enter in. The problem is that because there were so many municipalities working on that contract, it never made it out of Corporation Council before our city was ready to move forward. So ultimately, we decided to move forward on our own and do our own community choice aggregation campaign. And ultimately, we ended up aggregating with Victor in New York, and that's been a great partnership for us. So in November 2019, the city passed Local Law 2019-003, creating a CCA program. And that was when we started the real formal, informal-ish community engagement. That discussion had been ongoing for about a year anyway. And the third-party administrator that we ended up choosing in the end had been an active participant in helping us decide whether or not we wanted to pursue CCA. And their attitude the entire time was, ultimately, we don't care whether or not you decide to work with us. We care whether or not you decide to choose CCA. And as a result, they came to many community meetings and helped us with the education with our residents. In February 2020, when we put out our bid for third-party administration, they brought the strongest offer. So for the community, it was really easy to select Rocktricity because they had a great local presence. They were started from a grassroots organization of climate coalition workers that this was something that they genuinely cared about, and they refused to do anything other than 100% renewable, which was something that we also found really attractive. And once we had selected Rocktricity to be our third-party administrator, we started the more formalized community engagement process. And that was when we started really sending out letters, having it as a regular agenda item on our environmental committee, holding a variety of seminars and webinars. As I'm sure you can see by that date, this was a little bit challenging because we started to move forward with this right around the time that we all were told we couldn't stay, or we couldn't go out of our houses anymore. And Rocktricity was incredible with pivoting and finding ways to still do a great job engaging the community, even though we couldn't be together in person. So again, I really want to emphasize the importance of this role because they are a partner in this process with you, and you want to make sure that you choose the right one for your community. Next slide, please. So in August through October, we had gone out to bid several times. The issue that we were running into was that the commodity was at an all-time low. And because of that, suppliers were not really interested in signing CCA agreements because of the implications for them once the commodity recovered. So we actually had to go to bid 3 times before we found the correct agreement and the correct deal for our community. The second round was actually really interesting because it was all these hybridized options and different ways that they could structure and scale pricing. And it was just way too complicated. The first time, nobody would even talk to us. So we had to be patient, but the benefit of that was that it gave us a longer window to work with the community and educate the community and help them get ready for this transition. October 2020, we finally got the price point that we were looking for. And from January 1st, 2021 until December 31st, 2022, all city residents in the city of Canandaigua who have not opted out of this program will receive their electricity at 0.00492 cents per kilowatt hour, which currently is lower than what RG&E is offering for its brown electricity. So again, we're in a community that is very environmentally conscious, and if the commodity fluctuates on us a little bit, they're going to be okay with that. But that's such a low price per kilowatt hour based on what historical trends have been in the price of electricity that actually represents a strong savings for our residents. Next slide, please. So I talked about this so far like it was a seamless process, and that would be a complete lie. You're going to have some challenges. There's no way to take on an initiative like this without having pushback from the community. We got a variety of pushback, everything from who do you think you are to you are violating my constitutional rights by trying to help me select my electric supplier. What was interesting about that, though, is a lot of the community pushback that we received was from people who generally tend to push back on everything the community does anyway. It was the one person that seems to attend every meeting and is always upset about something on the agenda. That's not saying that person's opinion and viewpoint and feelings are not important, but we weren't getting people coming to meetings in droves who were angry about us potentially pursuing this. Another thing we had to deal with as a community trying to inform and educate our residents was misinformation, which is rampant. There are a lot of people who believe they've got a PhD in Google and can pull amazing facts off the internet to refute things that are true, but with information that is not true. One of them is that CCA impacts the delivery of your electric, and that if you choose to go into a CCA agreement, it will hurt the current flow and the actual power which the electricity comes into your house. That's completely false. It's using the exact same power lines and the exact same delivery mechanism that you would be using if you were selecting your standard power supply for your region. So I can assure you that all of my appliances in the city of Canandaigua work just fine, and they work to the intended power capacity. Another really common myth that's tied to that is that CCA will impact the reliability of your service. Again, completely not true. It is the same power lines. It is the same delivery system. It does not slow down your electric. It does not go out. If the power goes out, it's going to go out for everybody. So it's not like CCA customers are going to lose their power and everybody else is going to have it too. It uses the same power lines. So it's not going to impact the reliability of your service because it's using the exact same service that everyone else is going to be using, regardless of what the supply is. Another one that I hear that really frustrates me is CCA doesn't have an impact. And you'll get people that will say things like, well, there's no possibility to pull 100% renewable supply from the grid. Or, you know, it's not going to really impact people's savings, or it's not really going to have an impact on the climate itself. I strongly disagree, in particular with that last one, because if you have an entire city or an entire community or an entire region that goes with community choice aggregation, that's an entire region of residential housing that is no longer using fossil fuels and releasing those GHGs into the air. Even one or two residents in your neighborhood putting a geothermal unit on their house will have an impact. Whole communities deciding that they want their supply to be 100% renewable definitely has an impact. And another one that you hear a lot is you'll end up paying more. As we talked about, electric is a commodity. Electric tends to fluctuate. However, the commodity is coming off its historic all-time low. And I'm confident that with large aggregations, you can get the price of electric down to a rate that is going to be really pleasing, not just for the people signing the contract in City Hall, but for the residents when they open their bills. Another thing that you'll run into is what appears to be a general lack of engagement or empathy towards the idea. I think sometimes people in municipal positions take that as a lack of interest or a lack of interest in wanting to see that initiative move forward. What I've found in my experience working in local government is that 95% of your residents are really happy. 95% of the people in your community you're not hearing from because they support what you're doing. You very rarely get somebody that comes to a public meeting to laud city council and say that they're thrilled with everything that they're doing. But you will occasionally get a couple people that'll show up at meetings and be upset about something. Just because you're not getting feedback from residents, just because you have one or two people who are very vocally opposed, doesn't mean that it's still not a good idea to explore, and it doesn't mean it's not the right thing for your community. And again, reaching everyone in the community, we're going to need to make sure we touch every one of our 11,000 residents to make sure that this is something that they want to do. A couple things about that. You cannot force people to open their mail. You cannot force people to pay attention to the news. You cannot force people to watch newscasts or read the paper. We went through an intensive 15-month engagement process with our community that included it being an item on an agenda for a public meeting at least 8 times. We had it in the newspaper. We had it on FLTV. We had 6 different forums or webinars about it. I worked on a webinar specifically for CCA with Jewel and Rocktricity when they went to implement the program. We sent out at least 8 mailings between Jewel, Rocktricity, and the city of Canandaigua. When the power switched over on January 1st, I still got people who told me that we didn't try to contact them. We didn't try to get their opinion. We didn't try to do this the right way. We hid this from the community. Again, you can't force people to want to pay attention. All you can do is do your best. At the end of the day, I was extremely pleased and extremely confident that the city of Canandaigua and our partner in implementation, Rocktricity, did everything that we could through every possible form of media, be it printed, social, or broadcast, to reach people in our community to get their feedback. What we generally found is we weren't hearing anything because people were approving of the decision. So just because you're not hearing from them and just because you're worried about having to get everyone's opinion doesn't mean that it's not a good decision to pursue and that people aren't going to be supportive. Next slide, please. So key takeaways and lessons learned from my experience in implementing community choice aggregation. Number one is the importance of the third-party administrator. It is critical that when you go to that RFP process and you review those responses and you hold those face-to-face meetings, that you ask the right questions and that you're prepared and that you pick the third-party administrator that is going to be the best one for your community and is going to represent your community the way that you want to be represented, because in a lot of ways they're the face of your campaign and they are the ones out there leading the charge. So if you don't approve of the way that they want to go about the work, if you don't like their methods, if you get a general vibe that you don't know if you can work with those people, listen to that because it's important. Also the importance of the public engagement process, and I can't stress this enough. The Public Service Commission only requires a 90-day public engagement process to enact CCA. That is far too short in my opinion. I think that is a good way to upset your residents and have them have a ground to stand on that you didn't try to inform us. The more that you work to try and engage the community, the more widely accepted that would be, because people are going to feel more informed, they're going to feel ready, any fears or concerns that they have are going to be dispelled. Again, there's going to be people who you're not going to reach, and there's going to be people who you don't hear from until after you've already implemented. But I can't stress enough how important it is to really put together a strong public engagement process to help your residents make this transition. Radio silence is not a bad thing. When we started to advertise that the city was going to do this, I was expecting my phone to be ringing off the hook with people who were going to be angry and upset and want to opt out and let me know what they thought about my mother, but I didn't hear anything. I really didn't. And I kept waiting for the calls to come. And once in a while you will get one or two or three, but it was quiet. And again, once we implemented and we kind of went back and asked some questions of people in the community, they were aware of what was going on because they'd opened their mail or they'd seen it in the paper, and they trusted the people that they'd elected and put into positions of authority to make decisions for them, that this was a good choice for the community. So just because you're not hearing anything back doesn't mean that this isn't something that you should do. Also, don't let minimal pushback and misinformation impede the progress that you're trying to make. It is so easy to get clouded by, you know, those one or two people or three people who come to every meeting and they're upset about something. And, you know, if you're running into that, I tell community groups that want their municipalities to act this, then you should go to meetings too, because you're taxpayers. And if this is something that is important to you and that you want in your community, it is just important that you let your elected officials know that, as it is the people coming and saying that this isn't something that they're interested. There are groups in every community that are dying to work with their municipality on initiatives like this. So utilize them, let them help you spread that message, and let them help you maybe reach into segments of the community that you're not getting to make sure people know that this is a good thing. And then finally, the impact is real. When the city installed a solar array for its municipal operations in 2017, the first year alone, we eliminated our GHG gas emissions by 85%. That's incredible. And now we're going to have our residents all operating on renewable power. And how much GHG emissions are we going to reduce or eliminate completely with 90-something, I think it's 96% was the ultimate sign-in rate for CCA, with 96% of our residents now running their homes and businesses on completely green electric. That's absolutely going to have a huge impact, and it's going to improve the air quality of our city, and it's going to make sure that we don't have nasty things running into our drinking water. So that's just one city. That's just one example of the process that was taken. The more communities that are interested in doing this, the larger impact we can have. Next slide, please. And with that, I am here to help. I love talking about community choice aggregation. So if you have any questions or concerns, you know, you get to the top of the stairs after the meeting and you realize, oh man, I should have asked that, please reach out, because I'm more than happy to answer any questions about this as I am now. And I want to thank Jason and Heike for having me, because this was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, Rob. Thank you for sharing your experience too. I think, you know, I know here we haven't had any municipalities really go through this process yet. So to hear from you and how the process worked, you know, good, bad, and ugly, I guess you could say, it's great to thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Absolutely.